Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I am Laurel Myra, the Director of Behavioral Health here at NAC, and I'm also a Red Lake band member. So welcome, everyone.
Which Michelle?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm Michelle Corcoran. I'm the MAT nurse manager at NAC. Welcome.
Beth?
Hi, my name is Beth Ryan, and I am the Project Echo coordinator.
And Lisa Shefsky, could you introduce yourself as a guest speaker?
Anishinaabe Duke, Lisa Shefty, Indigenous Cause, Jaganashimong, Idash, Miss Guanaqua Dukwe Indigo, Ojibwe Miss Guanaqua I'm also from the Red Lake Nation. And I also too grew up here in Minneapolis, and I'm very connected to a lot of folks in the community. I'm a community organizer. I'm a hell raiser, just kidding. I ruffle feathers. Donna and I worked together when I was in my early 20s too, fresh out of college. And she told me, Lisa, leave this job. And I listened. And I've been listening to her ever since. And so I'm so happy to always have a moment with you, Donna. Especially, I wish I could start my day every day with you and your good words. Should I dive into it?
Oh no, sorry, Lisa. We're doing the introductions. We're gonna go through that, and then we'll come back to you. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot like that. Then I'm Kari Rabi. I'm a family practice physician and addiction medicine physician here at NAC, and I treat our patients with opioid use disorder. So I'm just gonna go into the PowerPoint here. Okay. There we go. So there's our agenda for today. Donna already did the prayer and land acknowledgement with us. I'm doing the introductions and agenda and the Zoom guidelines. Michelle will be doing our announcements. Lisa Shefke will be doing our didactic, which is on the intercultural development inventory. And then if we have time, we do have a case presentation, and then we will close. So as far as Zoom goes, please introduce yourself in the chat function, type in your name, title, organization, and email. That way we can get back to you if you have any questions or just to keep track of who's with us today. Also, you can update your name on your screen, right click on your image and rename, and then turn your camera on so we can see you. It's always easier when we can see everybody. And then mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If we hear noise, we might mute your microphone for you. You can use the chat or hand raise function if you need attention. And as always, no protected health information. Michelle, could you please do our announcements?
Absolutely. So we meet the first and third Wednesday of every month at noon Central Standard Time. It's over lunch. Feel free to eat, drink coffee, whatever you need to do. No worries there. Upcoming sessions. So the next session in March is going to be plant medicines in the treatment of opioid use disorder with Linda Black Elk. That should certainly be interesting. I'm excited to see that one. And then our first session in April is going to be a discussion about benzodiazepines and tapering off of them with Dr. Helen Wood from Hennepin. So some good stuff coming up. You want to do the next slide?
Yep.
Case presentations. We're always looking for case presentations. It doesn't have to be anything super formal or fancy. Basically, anything you want to talk about during one of these sessions regarding patient care, medications, things like that, you're welcome to submit the form at the hennepinhealthcare.org website, or you can email me directly at mcorcoran@nac-healthcare.org. And I think that's it.
Okay, good. And I'm going to stop sharing. And then Lisa, if you want to share your slideshow.
And before I go into present mode, while I can still see all of you, can who has done an IDI before? So I know like Laurel has, Dr. Myra, anybody else, maybe put it into the chat. Let me find the chat.
Yeah, it looks like we have Sarah has done one, and it looks like from what I can see, she's the only one besides Dr. Myra.
And this morning when I was getting prepared, I was like, wow, I only have 8 slides. So I quickly filled it up. So we might end early. So you all might be able to get to that case presentation. And then I remember I always say things like this, and then we take up all the time. So,
We hope you take up all the time today.
so I saw that somebody was from Children's Minnesota. I just recently left Children's as a health equity specialist, and I actually got trained through Children's to do the IDI, and I mostly administered this with providers at Children's. That's the background that I've had, is just like working with teams, working with individuals. The intercultural development inventory is a tool. It's a intercultural competence is the ability to shift perspective and adapt behavior to cultural difference and commonalities. I was trying to find different type of things. There's so many visuals to try to talk about cultures and what you can see and what you can't see. What you can see is on the top of the iceberg. It's observable, it's explicit, it's taught. What you don't see: attitudes, beliefs, expectations, values, assumptions, implicit, subconscious. And I think that what's valuable about the IDI is it really is trying to get you to think about your worldview, your mindset, how you view the world, how you view interactions. And also, since my experience comes from working within systems to talk about health equity, I like to think about this using the IDI in order to shift policies or practices. So like, if you're not getting any traction or can't get anywhere on having a conversation about anti-racism or anti-racism trainings or equity trainings, I find that shifting the conversation from an IDI perspective about monocultural mindset to an intercultural global mindset, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So again, there's so many different type of visuals to really try to broker this conversation about what can you see and what's underneath, and how attitudes and norms are formed by your culture, how your beliefs and value systems are informed by your culture, the way in which you have a relationship with others, how you show up in the workplace, how you engage at home, around and dinner. These are a type of things that you don't really know about a person. You would have to begin a relationship or get to know them more intimately to maybe know these type of things. So again, the IDI is a cross-cultural, valid, reliable measurement to measure intercultural competence. And it's been tested. It has a high predictive validity. When folks first take this, a lot of times they're like, I was so in my head, I didn't answer it. I know for me, the first time I took it, the things I was thinking about was I'm Anishinaabe from the Red Lake Nation. And I was like, am I answering this as a Native person within a system? Am I answering this within a Native person within a community or culture, or within the broader context of American culture? Like, I was kind of like in my head asking myself these type of questions. And because the IDI knows that folks kind of get in their head and they try to give you precursors to say, you know what, just answer the question. You're answering this from your perspective right now, within however you're defining culture. And so it's good to like kind of bring yourself back to that. But I'll have to admit, every single time I have taken the IDI, I've tested almost exactly the same. I've showed up almost exactly the same. I shouldn't say tested. That'll scare people off. This is just a an indication of where you are, and it's not good or bad. And what I really like about it is it's a continuum. So again, it's about the capability to shift your perspective and adapt behavior to cultural difference and commonality. People are not alike in their capacity and their capabilities to recognize and effectively respond to cultural differences and commonalities. In the intercultural development continuum, there are 5 orientations that range from more a monoculture orientation of denial and polarization to a transitional mindset of minimization to then a more intercultural or global mindset of acceptance and adaptation. Your success in achieving goals, like if you set goals around making improvements at how you show up interculturally, you can see that if you were to retest or retake the IDI again, you could possibly see that you can close the, you can continue along you can make progress along the continuum. So again, it's about shifting from a monocultural mindset to an intercultural mindset. Some of these things are like a monocultural mindset is make sense of cultural differences and commonalities based on one's own cultural values, practices, uses broad stereotypes to identify cultural differences, leads to less complex perceptions and experiences in cultural differences and commonalities. Shifting that monoculture mindset to an intercultural mindset means intercultural global mindset is more of making sense of cultural differences and commonalities based on one's own culture and values and practices. And this is one of the best things that I like is when I'm administering the IDI and I'm doing the individual one-on-one, I like to remind folks that this isn't about becoming an expert in all the cultures or everybody, more so as it's building that muscle of awareness to recognize that there are differences within cultures and folks and people, and even folks who live in the same country could have different experiences. And like folks who grown up in the same houses can have a different experiences, and that's based on perceptions, right? So the intercultural global mindset uses cultural generalizations to recognize cultural difference. So again, the monocultural mindset uses broad stereotypes to identify cultural differences, but the opposite of that for an intercultural global mindset uses cultural generalizations to recognize cultural difference. So some of the purpose of this is it can leave folks feeling more, I'm trying to remove so I can read the slide. Hold on one second. Sometimes I lose my mouse cursor. Hold on one second. I'm just clicking everything. Okay, I'm gonna stop clicking. Okay, I can't read the slide so much, but there's a lot of things that the IDI is shown to be very effective, improving positive feelings towards people from different cultures, improving feelings towards your own culture, because we're going to get into the 5 orientations, and one of them is polarization. So folks can sometimes feel like hypercritical of their own culture, or they don't like their own culture, and that can show up. And that's and so we the IDI talks about that and walks folks through that and how they're showing up in their orientation. Can you guys, is my screen, sorry.
We can see a screen. We can see your screen just fine.
Okay.
So, but if you need to start again and find your place, that's just fine.
Yeah. Hold on one second, because I lost my.
Take your time. Maybe unshare your screen and then there you go.
One second. Yeah, I lose my cursor on this. I have a MacBook too. Let's see. All right, I'm gonna try sharing it again.
Wait,
1 second.
was your PowerPoint on your Safari browser, on your web browser?
Oh man. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, yeah, it was. Or no, it wasn't. I got it. Whew, nervous.
It's all
I'm
good.
usually not nervous, but technology and I'm in control of it. It can make
You're good.
okay. All right. All right, there we go. All right, so yeah, so professional effectiveness, improve community relations in a multicultural environment, elimination of disparities between a dominant and non-dominant cultural members. So the IDI is it's a series of 50 questions that someone can take. It takes anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes. After the individual completes the IDI, each person's responses are analyzed and reports are prepared. So organizations can get a report for the whole entire group, how their group or their team or their project leads are showing up on an IDI in terms of the continuum. And then they'll also get individual reports, and the individual reports, then you walk through with a qualified administrator who can then make a plan. And then from there, you make an individualized intercultural development plan so that you can continue along, so you can make progress along the continuum. So again, the continuum is shifting from a monocultural mindset to an intercultural mindset. Denial, polarization are, we're going to get into some of those definitions, I think. And then minimization, a lot of organizations show up within minimization. And I'm going to spend some time talking about minimization because it's probably one of the most common spaces where folks show up, in my experience. Acceptance, adaptation. So acceptance and adaptation is really towards the spectrum of you're able to understand and appreciate differences in culture, and you're able to move along the continuum. So someone who's in adaptation might be able to bring someone within minimization along the continuum. And again, when you learn this language, I find it a lot easier because when I'm talking about policies and practices that are rooted in a lot of inequities, if I'm noticing that maybe there isn't progress on eliminating disparities within a policy or a practice, if I look at that policy and the folks around the table who are in charge of changing that policy, if I think about where are they at on this continuum, it becomes very useful. So if I have a lot of folks around the table who are within minimization, and the policy itself might be within minimization, then if I have the skills on how to bring someone along, then I can use different language that might help them see that opportunity. So for instance, minimalization, folks are stuck in universal terms. This is the way we've always done it. We have a policy for this. We can't think outside this box. We're all the same. I don't see color. We're all human beings. So folks within minimization will say things like this. And how I see it within policies, again, is the policies are rooted and based on dominant culture norms. So for instance, the PTO policies at your organizations. If you get 12 holidays that automatic holidays, and they include, like, let's say Christmas automatically, that is an example of that policy being rooted within minimization. So again, denial, polarization, minimization is an orientation that highlights cultural commonality and universal values and principles that may also mask deeper recognition and appreciation of cultural differences. So someone with a minimization, they might recognize difference, but they might be more stuck in tolerating differences. The old school D&I ideology methods were really heavy promoting work environments rooted within tolerance, being tolerant. Like, we're going to tolerate your culture. We're going to try not to see it. We're not going to see it because we don't know if it's good or if it's bad. It's like that polarization of good and bad. And also, we're going to base all of it around my own dominant cultural worldview. And so so I like to always focus on minimization because I think that this is probably where most organizations fall, their policy falls. Again, because it's based and rooted within that dominant cultural worldview. And so acceptance is an orientation that recognizes and appreciates patterns of cultural differences and commonalities in one's own and other cultures. Again, what I love about this is it is a good beginning tool to really start talking about culture and what does culture mean? How does culture show up for you in your workplace and how you make decisions? And then also, like, do you know your culture? And I think that for a lot of folks within dominant culture US, they're folks say, you know, I'm just a mixture of all these different nationalities and I'm just American, right? But the IDI, and much like a lot of anti-racism work, is really trying to get folks to think about how culture shows up for them. How do cultural norms, how are they important in your family? When you gather for dinner and feast with your family, is there a special way that you prepare the food? Is there a special prayer you start off with? What are the customs that have been passed on through your grandmothers? How does that show up at your table? And I think the reason why I like to say is, like, this is a good introductory tool if folks want to dive deeper and use it as a way to start thinking about anti-racism work. This is one of the best prescriptions for that I can say is, it's not about being an expert in every culture. It's about knowing who you are. What's your culture? What are the ways in which culture shows up and rituals show up in your life? And how has that influenced who you are? So adaptation, an orientation that can shift cultural perspectives and change behavior in culturally appropriate and authentic ways. So for this, someone who's in adaptation can not only move folks along the continuum, also they're the folks who probably are the most woke on your crew, and they're probably banging their heads on the wall because they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, how come things in this organizational culture just do not change? And it's because they haven't learned to refine their skills yet. And I think when folks think that there's not work for folks in adaptation to do, but there is a lot of work for folks to do, because one, it can be, it can transcend. And what I like to talk about too is the organizational cultures, but also the policies and procedures. Where are they at on this continuum? Can we try to shift it? Can we make a policy more equitable when everyone around the table is stuck in minimization and maybe polarization? So I don't spend a lot of time talking about polarization because they're difficult folks to talk to. Just kidding. Because they don't want to see any other perspective. They dig their feet in.
They're still fighting the Civil War. Sorry.
Yes. And we probably have them folks in our families and around the dinner table, and they're probably the ones probably also who don't want to talk about culture and don't want to talk about religion or politics at their dinner tables. They probably have really strict rules around that because they're not able to want to shift and think differently and critically about that experience or their experiences. The other thing I think is important to highlight here too is in the defense area is that someone might be overly critical of their own cultural values and practices. And I think that the reason why this is important, again, if you're overlaying a tool like this with anti-racism work, is this is kind of where white guilt falls in. And folks are like, oh, why do we do this? And I'm paralyzed by guilt and history, and I don't have any solutions on how to how to eliminate disparities, let's say, or disparities are so big and broad. What can we do within our hospital walls because we can't influence homelessness, or someone who might be stuck in this type of mindset feels completely limited by possibilities of like solving for you know, issues that are impacting communities. Okay, so when one takes this IDI, they're going to get a perceived orientation. They're going to get a score about maybe where they think they are. And a lot of folks kind of think that it's more common that folks have their perceived orientation is thinking that they're higher than where they actually are. So a perceived orientation, they might rate their own capabilities of appropriately adapting to cultural differences within acceptance. And I think we see this a lot when folks think they understand equity, they understand cultures, they might be around different folks from different cultures. They might have had some travel experiences abroad. And so that this idea or this misconception might place them in a higher level than they might actually be. It can be problematic for a lot of reasons, because then if you're constantly thinking that you are in a space to understand and recognize patterns of cultural difference, but you're really not, then that might show up in your work too, or it might create intercultural conflicts when you're thinking that you understand someone's perspective or worldview, but in actuality, you might not be. The perceived orientation is really important because it places yourself along the intercultural development continuum in a way that reflects how you see yourself when you interact with culturally diverse individuals and groups. Your perceived orientation can be denial, polarization, minimization, acceptance, or adaptation. Your actual developmental orientation might show you where you actually are on this continuum. So this is showing in minimization, a very, very low minimization. So again, it's a spectrum. So someone who's reflecting this, even though it's a low minimization score, it's still within minimization. So I see folks sometimes score high minimization. So they're in the like 112s, but they think that they're in adaptation and they're in the 140s. The real work for someone when they get this score or they look at this, I like to say, it's not to get you to adaptation overnight. It's really to close the gap between where you think you are and where you actually are. So the developmental orientation indicates your primary orientation towards cultural differences and commonalities along the continuum as assessed by the IDI. The developmental orientation is the perspective that you most likely use in situations where cultural differences and commonalities need to be bridged. Your development orientation can be denial, polarization, reversal, minimization, acceptance, adaptation. So this developmental orientation is probably where most people on their even tempered days are falling. There used to be something in IDI called a trailing orientation. They don't really do it anymore because I think folks had a hard time with it because, you know, A trillion orientation is like those days when your cup is full and your adrenals are fatigued, and the way your partner chews their food irritates you. You know those days when you ain't got no patience for anybody. You might snap on the waitress, or you don't have patience for another telemarketer call. Those days when we're having the most stressed out days, we're tired, we should have probably took PTO. Just kidding. Or, those are the times where we're taking it out maybe on our family. Because I know I'm pretty good out in the public, but when I get home, I'm pretty ugly. And I'm like, oh, this moment, I need some real rejuvenation, some real reflection, some real restart, a reset. But when your cup is running over, how are you showing up? You might, on your good days, on your normal days, when you're rested and fed and your cup has so much room for everything, you're going to be, this is your developmental orientation. And I do think it's important to think about on those moments when you're not your best self, and you're maybe the worst version of yourself, you might be showing up lower than your developmental orientation. So you might be showing up within denial, polarization. So someone right here, if their IDI developmental orientation was 88.89, on that bad day, when they're having a bad day, they might show up in defensiveness. And how that's going to look is, again, defensiveness could look like you're really critical. You're not critical of your own cultural values. You're not critical of that policy. You can understand how that policy is inequitable because it was written with a universal tone. This applies to everybody. Everybody's going to get treated the same. So when you're having a bad day, you might not be able to review that policy in the same way you would have on a day where you had, a lot of rest, and your cup and your adrenals were not fatigued. So again, the real work is between closing the gap on where you think you are and where you actually are. So this orientation gap is the orientation gap is a perceived orientation score. If your perceived orientation score is higher than your developmental orientation score, this indicates an overestimate of your intercultural competencies. That is, you may feel you are more adaptive than you likely are. I have to be honest, I've never seen someone really have an orientation score that went the other way, where they think they are probably in denial, but they're actually in minimization. I have yet to see that. But if that were the case, a perceived orientation score that matches their a developmental orientation score that is lower than their perceived is just an underestimate. And again, when someone's perceived score and their orientation score matches, or they're really similar, the only time I've really seen that is in adaptation. And again, folks within adaptation have work to do also. So like maybe it's, can they learn techniques to teach this to others, to bring others along the continuum? Can they stop banging their heads against the wall because policies or practices don't change within their organization? So these are the folks who are like, probably like, they're just like, I don't understand like why we're doing things the way we are. And they can clearly see the opportunities for eliminating disparities in practice. But the system just doesn't change. And so someone who scores an adaptation, it's just about giving them some more skills on how to be a change agent, maybe. Also too, like it might give perspective if you're in adaptation, but say your supervisor is a minimization, there might be survival techniques one can use so that they're not completely powerless in situations, right? Because this is one of the limitations that I personally feel that the IDI has is it doesn't talk about power dynamics. And of course, it doesn't really dive into anti-racism work. But if you had a IDI qualified administrator like myself, I'm going to look for any opportunity to dive into that work on an individual level or with teams by using this as a starting point, as a tool in the toolbox. So let's take a deeper look at minimization, because like I said, most organizations, most teams fall within minimization. And some of the ways in which they're showing up, they might not be fully aware that their own ideas and behaviors are culturally grounded. So again, folks who are like of the dominant culture, white folks, Americans, they think, well, I don't have a culture. I'll hear that a lot. Or, like my great grandmother came from Germany, but I don't know anything about those customs. And, like I had a grandmother who came from Germany, and I'm like, there are so many ways in which it's German culture shows up on my dinner table. Like every Christmas, we have Polish and potato salad. And the way my grandmother made potato salad was actually, there's no German restaurants in Minnesota that really have the kind of potato salad she made, because potato salad in Germany is regional. And the way in which she made potato salad was actually the only time I've ever had someone who had a potato salad similar to hers was a foreign exchange student. Her name was Goshka. She was from Poland. And I had her potato salad. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is the closest to my grandmother's potato salad I've ever had. And when I told my grandma that, she was completely insulted. So never compare your grandmother's potato salad to anybody who's not German when she's German. But it was pretty funny. But it was the closest. But also where my grandmother grew up in Germany was very close to Poland, right? So it's like, this is culture. We need folks to recognize that how you eat your potato salad is culture. When you listen to music, or what kind of music you listen to, is culture. Culture is passed on through generations, through attitudes, beliefs, who we are, how we show up. Oh, I'm doing a time check. Do I only got till 1? See what I do? Oh my goodness. I'm going to go through this. So once you have, once you get a group IDI assessment, you can see how your whole team is showing up. Then you can do your individual, how you show up. Then you can make a plan. And in your plan, you get to answer and do the work. Everyone on your team, this is where managers who are building into their performance improvement plans around equity, plans around how they can build that into their performance reviews, looks like this, like encouraging your staff to do this work, because you can assign it and folks may never come back to it. So some of the things is like really spend time thinking about what is diversity in your community? How do you celebrate holidays? What is community, or what does culture mean for you? Other questions are, how did you become fully aware of other cultural groups? When was the first time you did? Think about that. Think about the first time you met someone from a different culture. What was that like? And then again, if you're going to overlay this and go deeper, anti-racism work, I would then ask, spend some time and reflect. When was the first time I realized that you were the race you were? So like when was the first time I realized that I was American Indian? And I do have that story. And what's your story? And when was the first time you realized you were white? And I think that, again, that's deeper work. That's for another presentation. And I think we've done it here in ECHO. So again, the IDI generates two things, the group department, the individual profile. The IDI, the actual cost of it is pretty cheap. So you can get an IDI for 30 bucks, or if you're a part of a nonprofit, you can get it for $21 each. The real cost is in the planning and the deeper work is in the individual one-on-one with a qualified administrator. Those are all negotiable. There's a lot of people who are administrators. The YWCA are administrators. They're pretty expensive. Just kidding. So definitely reach out. You can I think there are so many networks. There's so many people being trained in this. I don't know, Laurel, Dr. Myra, I don't know. I think, are you trained to do this?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not?
Mm-mm.
But the training literally is one-on-one. It gives you plans on how you can, you're talking to someone about how they're showing up, their perceived indicator and where they actually are. You're hearing from folks about their culture and their community. And what I like to do is really encourage folks to learn about their own culture, start to build a self-awareness at how culture shows up for you in your life, in your work life, and then also how does it show up in terms of your belief system, in terms of how you operate. I just did one this week with a fella from Iowa State University, and we talked a lot about professionalism and how it shows up about how being punctual, being how to dress at work, what kind of cultural undertones was that sending, how have you shifted and changed. Again, some of the group discussions is before you maybe go down this road with your team, try to ask yourself some questions around your accomplishments, or what do you want to accomplish around cultural, around understanding cultural differences. Again, the thing with minimization is someone within minimization focuses on similarities. Someone in adaptation can recognize differences and then shift how they show up. I have tons of examples for this, but we are running out of time. Here goes some of my contact information. And so, yeah, we have a little bit of time for questions. Are you guys going till 1:30?
No, we go until 1.
Oh, dang, sorry. But I have
No,
some
you're fine.
questions if anybody has questions.
I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. I, having gone through this process myself as part of a very large majority white team and company, it was really eye-opening for a lot of people to see that there were other cultures that we're serving, that we actually should adjust our policies to be towards the people that we're serving, as opposed to reflecting our own culture within that. So absolutely, I think this is such an important tool for agencies that are looking to do that work. So thank you.
I have a question, Lisa. How does an organization or an individual go about doing this? Like, where do you go to start this process? And then once you do, if an individual, say, wanted to do one, where do you then find the qualified administrator, or does that just kind of come along with the process? Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so you can go to the IDI website and it will talk through when they're doing trainings to become a qualified administrator. And so for me, I was working at Children's, and my boss wanted us to be able to do the IDIs with providers and teams. So they paid for all 3 of us to go to the training, because then it was cheaper for the organization to send some folks to the training so that they can then do the training, the trainings in-house. But sometimes you might find that if within smaller organizations, they might not a provider might not be comfortable, like the reason why I did IDIs for Iowa State. The reason why I did IDIs at Iowa State was because the teams are small, and so they weren't really comfortable having the IDI administrator be a colleague, because it's kind of like the first time you do it, you feel all those insecurities about like how you might show up, and how you might not want your colleagues to know this, or like it's very vulnerable. And if someone's first beginning this work, it can be really vulnerable. But again, once you get into it and you think about, wow, I was actually really conditioned in my community, in my family, and in the school I went to, and the society we grew up in, we've been conditioned to center dominant cultural norms, right? The nuclear family, or white, anything like specifically around like centering whiteness or white dominant culture. You know what I'm saying? If you grew up in America. But folks who let's say if someone grew up in Mexico City and they grew up in a community where everybody looked like them and everybody spoke the same language as them, they might also have a monocultural mindset. So being a person of color or a Native person doesn't necessarily mean that you have the skills to adapt, make changes, appreciate cultural differences between groups. But back to your question, folks like me can do it for your teams. I've been trying to tell Laurel I'm available for providers and staff at NAC. And so it's just a good introductory thing to do on your team, especially if you haven't had much inclusion efforts, or if you haven't begun talking about anti-racism work on your teams.
Does the price that you showed us, does that include doing the inventory and kind of that assessment and development of a plan?
Yeah, so that the actual questionnaire is like $21 to $30. The individual time depends on who you get. So like if you have the YWCA, I'm pretty sure their rate is $250 an hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it varies by individual. So like I'm not as expensive. Just kidding. Mac will get it for basically free for me.
I like that.
I think we're going to take you up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy it too. And I really like going through it with folks. I think it's a good tool to have. And I give really good concrete suggestions. Like one of the things is about again, it's like not becoming an expert in a culture. So like for me, a universal global norm around Muslim culture, let's say, is I have pretty much an awareness that there might be appropriate times that I can shake someone's hand or not shake someone's hand. And I don't understand all of why or when, but I have developed, I've changed my practice so that I always ask, is it okay if I shake your hand? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like how if I'm always constantly shaking someone's hand, and that's my cultural norm of appreciation of just meeting them, someone in adaptation will be able to stop and change that practice that they've grown up with in order to meet someone else. But someone within minimization might not even understand why it's necessary to change how you show up. So like, they're like, I shake hands and that's a sign of respect. So I'm not going to be willing to like change that practice. You know what I'm saying? So it's about really giving concrete examples. And sometimes you have to be vulnerable enough. And that's where the one-on-one comes in, because someone's going to hopefully push you a little bit to talk about your experiences, your family, your culture. How did you grow up? Who did you see? Did everybody you grew up with, did they look like you? Did they speak like you? Did they live like you? And then it's like given some tools on how to close that gap between the perceived orientation and the developmental orientation. Thank you for the questions. Any other?
And so thank you so much for doing that presentation for us, Lisa. And I think that we'll be hoping to do that at NAC very soon.
Thank you all.
Okay, I hope you all join us for our next echo. I don't have it right in front of me what the next one is right now.
The next one is traditional
Mhm.
medicines
Mm.
with Linda Blacko. Yeah, that'll be on, what is that, the 17th?
She's a very good speaker, so I hope that you all can join us for that. And thank you for joining us today, and have a great day and the rest of the week. Thank you, Lisa. And if the Echo team could stay on for a debrief, that'd be great.